many little tentacles to it, and so many changes and so much influence and input into it. And yet when it's all said and done, it actually ends up being fairly simple. You know, it's a set of criteria that you look at and work through, and through best practices, experience, knowledge, those kinds of things, you actually come to a conclusion of this is where it's going to be. That the one thing that I can tell you absolutely for sure is that there's nothing about it that's absolutely for sure. You know, pricing it's seasonal, it's area related, it's amenity, it's condition. I mean, it just goes from all kinds of stuff. You know, it's what kind of house it is, and is the buyer pool out there that would actually make it worth a little bit more than maybe it would be before.
Where the quote kind of came from was discussing, you know, our marketing and that, and it doesn't matter how good your marketing is, it can't overcome a poorly priced home. So, and that's what he's saying is if we price it, the marketing kind of does its thing, I guess.
Yeah, and one of the things that you have to know is when you're in this business, there's always somebody that is just like massive, you know, like agent, you know, that does so much business that, you know, they have the ability to market like crazy. There's like, oh yeah, like him. You know, you do a lot of stuff. You make money, you're able to spend money, you're able to do these massive, you know, marketing campaigns and things. You spend money on it. But, you know, a lot of us aren't there. We're not there where it's like, oh, we just shell out a bunch of money, you know. And so you're not going to outmarket you know, a higher producing agent. You're just not going to do it. So it's like, okay, now what do you do? Because everybody's like, oh, you got to market this, market, you know. And it's like, wait a minute, there's another side to the equation, and that's pricing. So the idea here is that you might not be able to compete at a marketing level with higher producing agents or teams or that kind of thing. You might not be able to do that. And the idea here is that's okay. Because the single most important thing is pricing. And if you got your one little listing that you got and you're running out there and you've worked your butt off and you've studied all the different angles, you've looked at all the numbers, you've examined all the different resources of information, and you've come together and you've put a pricing on that's aggressive and competitive and ready to go and that kind of stuff, these people, they're going to bring you a buyer. Yeah, it works. They're going to bring you a buyer because they know they're, ooh, hey, that's a good listing right there.
Sure.
And so they're going to sell it for you. You don't have to worry about spending money to go market, that kind of stuff. So the idea here is to give you some tools to allow you to grow into the best pricing specialist that you can become. That's what you need to be, because you're not going to outmarket, but you can outprice. And I don't necessarily mean outprice like being the lowest in market. I'm going in there, I'm cutting in, I'm going, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, I'm looking to sell it in, you know, 30 minutes on market, that kind of stuff. You're going to go in there as the pricing specialist that identifies those things. And those things are, you have influences, you have buyers. And buyers, they become pretty smart in the marketplace. And you guys worked with some of those where they all of a sudden the buyer knows more about the pricing structure around the areas that you're looking at, because maybe you're looking with 4 or 5 different buyers. You're doing business in different price ranges. They've got one singular focus, and that's what they're looking at. So they become really good at that price range. They know, man, at 175, this is what I can expect, and they're looking for it. And they want the best house at 175. So the buyers have that, okay? And those buyers, that's where value comes from. It comes from the pool of buyers that's out there at any given time, available, ready, willing, and able to make a purchase on the property. That creates the value of the property, okay? And then the other side, you know, you go over here and after you've sold a home and they look at all the different numbers and all that kind of stuff, and they decide that, you know, this is a price that this home might sell at. Yeah, that's sellers. They study the market. They're like, well, this one sold for that much, and have any of you went to a thing and they're like, yeah, well, the house just down the street sold for this much.
But theirs is always better.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, they've got heavy duty nails, so it's worth more. Okay, so that's pricing. Okay, so you got value on one end, and you got pricing on the other, and your job is to try to get them as close together as possible. That right there is called entry pricing, and that's where do you go into the marketplace? What is that entry into the marketplace? Because if you go in high, the seller's gonna be like, yeah, that's right. What's up? We're gonna get some money out of this baby. And then you go and nobody shows it. And you're sitting there and going, whoa, because now the buyers are telling you, you didn't put a very good value on that property. That's not where it ought to be. Okay, so the other side, this I can show you, this is really a new phenomenon in the business. Coming back from my history, there's a new phenomenon in the business, and it's buyers that understand that they may have to pay more than the property's listed for. That's new. That hasn't been around very long. Most buyers are like, well, I ain't paying list price. It's not happening. You remember that, Kathy? That mindset. I'm not paying list price for a house.
And you see that as evidence too, that if a home is overpriced now, you're not seeing as many lowball offers. So having that price right the first time, because you get buyers that walk away over 10,000, where they used to just offer what they wanted to pay, whereas now they're just not offering. So. Yeah.
So you that phenomenon is really different. So the fear that people have, well, I mean, I don't want to underprice it. I don't want to sell it, and it's like, well, no, rest assured, if you happen to price it really right on or just a touch under, the market will correct you, but they will actually correct you up to pricing. If you've got that really nice home, it's ready to sell, everything's great about it, and it's in the market that people want to be in, that kind of thing, and you price it 5,000 under, the buyers are going to come and they're like, oh no, we'll give you that much for it. They will actually correct it. That's a brand new phenomenon, and you need to share that with sellers because they're all scared to death. They all want their last dime out of that baby, and rightfully so. Okay, so that's what pricing is about. That's why you have to be the best pricing specialist that you can possibly be, and that's why we brought Seth in today to help with it. So we're going to go over a few things. We'll just run through some of these beliefs. Is that what we get on board? Yep. Okay. We'll run through these kind of quickly. I think just the pricing beliefs, that kind of stuff. And I think, well, actually, you've got to run through these because you've got studied them. Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that, but I did make a few notes. Yeah. So, I mean, the first is kind of the core principle of there's so much less resistance if you provide the information to help the seller come to your conclusion where to come to. So a lot of this will be designed to give you the tools to educate that seller so that they can come to the same decision you did, the correct decision. Number two, it's not exact science. Lance already spoke to that. We've all listed, I've probably done 1,000 BPOs, and I've done, relocations and all of that, where you're going into homes with 3 other listing agents and competing for that. A big part of that's pricing. And I don't have this all figured out. I mean, I don't think anyone has it completely down. You get an appraiser, and 3 appraisals are all going to come in with 3 different values. So that being said, there's still rules to follow, and those rules to price it accurately are what we're going to go over today also. Neighborhood specific. So when you're pulling comparables, we'll talk about that too, the areas. You obviously want to keep it as tight as possible. Quarter-mile radius is If you're on the edge of a neighborhood, if you're in Beaverdale, but you know 2 blocks over values change directly, don't use the radius search. Go in and draw your neighborhood out so that you're not grabbing non-comparable homes. That being said, on acreages, we'll often go 10 miles out, or we may have a property in rural Iowa that's 30 minutes east of Des Moines and have to go 30 minutes north or a different direction to try to get comparables. Some of those areas it's almost impossible because there's MLSs that are crossing, all sorts of issues there. We already spoke a little on value, price, and entry, and we will here shortly. Buyers determine the value. That's what, we've all heard the phrase that homes are worth what someone will pay for them. You can think of it like art. Some art is worth $1.5 million and other is worth nothing. And really that value, and the same with the home, is ultimately the value of it's what the buyer is going to pay for it. So you always got to keep kind of buyer's eyes when valuing them and not just the seller's perspective. Obviously the sellers ultimately determine price, the asking price. Competition determines entry. That's what we're going to go over too, as far as the competition's not your sold, it's your active. So the importance of not just using solds, but seeing what the competition is doing, what you're going to be up against. And a lot of this stuff we're just touching on briefly, and we'll kind of go through it in depth here in the next few pages. The seller needs can never justify value. I mean, those of you that have been realtors for a while remember going in 2010 or whenever it was, and you would take their payoff, you would add your fees in, that's the asking price of the home. It really had sometimes little to do with comps. You had a seller that had to sell, they had no money, so unless it was going to be a short sale. The whole point of this is to avoid that. In this market, when that happens, it's probably just something you need to pass up. Buyers sell and pay more than fair market value. There are exceptions to that. We've all had it where, I sold my personal home, sold instantly. I later questioned why, because I thought I had it a little overpriced. And I found out the buyer's kids lived 2 doors down, and they were going to buy my house pretty much no matter what.
Yeah, and you're like, dang it.
Exactly. So anyway, there are exceptions to that. But in general pricing, you should never price it hoping that kid's 2 doors down and the parent's going to buy it. I mean, that's a really rare exception. So there's a difference between taking a listing and selling a listing. What we're going to teach today is how to sell the listing. We've probably all, even though I'm going to say not to do it today, I've done it. I've taken listings where deep down I don't believe they're going to sell. We're way overpriced. I think later I'll get convinced. That's a terrible strategy. Don't do it. Don't do what I did. But part of it will be me telling why, that was a mistake, and ultimately I paid the price. Opportunity cost associated with overpriced listings. We're seeing now, I should have pulled up a chart for this, but some of these homes, if we overprice them to begin with, and then later we'll say, well, we'll correct to the right price if that one buyer isn't out there. We're seeing them having to overcorrect. So instead of selling it, if we list at 180 when it really should be at 175, 2 months later we reduced to that 175 where it have sold day one. Now we're having to sell for 170 or 165. There is a cost associated with overpricing the listing up front.
Yeah, and this again is another phenomenon that's just coming on this year. We're just starting to experience that, where it's just a little downturn in the market. And it's the supply and demand thing, because your buyer pools are shrinking right now. And because buyer pools are shrinking, they're able to command better. And so we're starting to see that switch a little bit, where even though numbers of listings are still low, and so it still shows that it's a seller's market, the reality is starting to become that the buyer pools are shrinking. And because of that, it's almost starting to twist into a touch of a buyer's market right now, especially in price ranges. Certain price ranges, buyers owning their world in certain price ranges. You get over 300, it's a buyer's market. I don't care what the numbers say. I guarantee you, it's a buyer's market.
If you get over 700, I mean, it's even more crazy there.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not if the seller's going to lose money; it's how much money is the seller going to lose from their custom home they built.
Exactly. So the thing we're talking about is how it's like, well, let's test the market. What they're asking to do is chase the market right now. If you test the market in January and the market starts to catch on, you know, up into March and April and that kind of thing, where the market's like starting to fire, you know, that's a mindset you can live with. But at the latter part of the year like this, man, don't be testing the market, because you'll fail, because you're going to be chasing the price instead of getting in front of it and catching it as it goes by. You're going to chase that price, and to catch up with it is costly.
Yeah, and since you brought up testing the market there, another thing to keep in mind is you should never be testing the market on a Triton resale or a track home or something like that. That term we use, and I use it still in lots of listing appointments, it's you have a very high-end home that's custom built. There are no comparables. You have an acreage that you can't find anything even similar to it within 20 miles. Those are the kind of homes, berm homes. I have a log cabin home that's on a wood foundation, but it has close neighbors. How do you value that? How do you make adjustments? I mean, that's some of what we're going to talk about, is the adjustments. But really testing the market should only be done, that phrase should only be used on homes where you truly, even with all your experience and all the data out there, can't come to a conclusion of what this home should sell for.
Yeah, it's measuring the buyer pool, and it's really hard to measure the buyer pool on a unique property. You just don't know.
16, our goal here isn't to teach you how to convince the seller to underprice their home. I've been in situations recently, I had another agent that was in the same situation. They priced the home what they thought was fair. It sold too quickly. They sit around and have wine with neighbors, whatever, friends, and you will get criticized for undervaluing that listing. And what should have been a great source of referral is now, you know, the opposite. They're negatively
sell it if you put it
exactly
under the market. Yeah.
So anyway, basically, it's to say our goal here is not to teach to underprice homes. It's to accurately price homes so that that seller doesn't leave any money on the table. Tangible tools trump all opinions. So, you know, tangible is something you can feel and touch, and is reality, not just opinion. Obviously, the buyer's opinion is important, but as far as the seller and pricing goes, we need the tools to kind of go in there and actually show them why we came up with the value we did, through either, you know, both our experience and then through also the comparables out there. And then we're going to show too some adjustments. You know, that's a tangible tool saying 2 to 3 bedroom, you know, how much of adjustment do we make? How much, you know, negatively does view affect, things like that. I mean, I guess we'll move on here, but the pricing strategy supports win-win. So, you know, if you get that right price, not only do you win because you get a listing that sells fairly quickly that you can be happy about and use as a referral source, but you know, the buyer gets the proper price too. We don't have to worry about appraisal, stuff like that.
Right. So pricing, there's a lot of stuff. We talked about that. There's a lot of stuff to pricing and what it's about. And it was interesting as Seth and I met and talked about, okay, let's talk about, you know, pricing, that kind. We found out that we totally come at pricing from completely different angles.
We literally had the exact opposite approach.
Yeah,
but we did end up in the same.
We end up in the same spot. But so that's just tells you that, you know, where you start isn't the deal. It's where you end up at. And so my pricing approach is always go from the macro to the micro. Seth's is go from the micro to the macro. So it's completely different in that I like to look all around. I like to look, you know, at you know, the larger area, and then down into neighborhoods, and then down into, you know, the streets and the areas right around that property, and just get a feel. How's that work? What's going on in there, you know? And that gets my mindset, and that's where I gather the information of the house that sold down the street, you know, a week ago for this, you know, max amount of money. And like we talked, you know, you'll have that information, look that house up, and it's, you know, it's a 2-story instead of a split level. You know, it's 400 square foot larger. It's got a finished basement. This one don't. But, you know, sellers don't see that. They're like, well, I'm down the street, you know, it's close, so it must be the same. And that's not the case. So I take mine from that down, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but tell them how you do yours.
Yeah, I mean, to start with mine, I try to find that home's twin. If I can find that exact home out there, that's kind of my starting point. For instance, when I'm pulling comparables, I never do more than 100 square foot variance. So 1,800 square foot house, I'll pull from 17 to 1,900. If there's lots of comparables, I'll keep tightening that down until I just have a few, maybe 50. And then 2 stories in the same area, and really try to hone in exactly on other properties right off the bat. And then I go out and search a little further out in neighborhood, a little further out in price per square foot or square footage of the home, and then go to neighborhood and kind of the more macro. So at the end, it takes you to the same place. It's just your starting point.
Yeah, yeah, and it was interesting to hear it. I was like, oh, maybe I should try that and see how that works for me.
So we'll all have different strategies when we come out of this, but as long as you're kind of implementing the same techniques and that, you'll come to the same conclusions.
And one of the things that I think we've talked about this in a couple of different classes, but when you're becoming what we're calling a pricing specialist, or in here a pricing strategist, is that you can spend a ton of time and you can end up at a price, and then once you learn and go, okay, this is it. I mean, and maybe you even put it down and you do what I've always referred to as a pricing envelope. And the pricing envelope is a likely range that property would sell within, and the missing ingredient is time. So when you go in there and you find out, well, there's nothing pressing them, they don't have to. So maybe we're at the top of the envelope. But you go in there and find out, it's like, oh man, I mean, they need to be out of here. It's time, they gotta go. Well, then it's like, you need to get down in that envelope a little bit, come down in that range to create a little bit more entry level competition. So you gotta think about it that way. But the idea is when, what they call facilitating in intelligent decisions. And the idea behind that is that you have enough knowledge, and then you have the ability to convey that knowledge to that person that allows them self-discovery. Okay? Because if any of you that have kids will recognize it right away. If you just go tell the kids something, they'll be like, yeah, whatever. They're not buying into it at all. But if you can figure out a way that they can discover that fact on their own through you guiding them, and they're like, oh my gosh, did you know this? And you're like, oh, really? They've self-discovered the fact, and now it becomes important to them. So telling somebody what the price ought to be is less important than showing them why they should think that the price is going to be that way. So that's this facilitating intelligent decisions, is providing the information to them that you found along the way that will allow them to come to the conclusion that this is the number, and that's the number you want it to be.
That has a lot of benefits. So, when you're competing against other agents, you'll go in, you'll go through all that. The other agent said it's worth 10,000 more, even though you educated them. That other agent will often get that listing. But as that listing goes bad with that other agent, they'll remember, oh, Seth said this would happen. Seth pointed that out. Seth remembered, and then all of a sudden you build your credibility through that first listing, and you become a second listing agent when it's priced properly and actually sells. So missing out on that listing initially, even if you've educated them properly, can be really beneficial to get it done well.
Yeah, so just sharing with sellers that process of where you're going, why you're going certain places. So, I studied what's sold in the last 6 months. I've studied that because that's going to be a base that you work from. But even more important now, you have to understand that more important than sold from 6 months ago right now, don't be careful with that, because 6 months ago we were in a different market, completely different market. Now you better start looking at what the pendings, what price did they come on at, and did they sell it at, or did they, go off the market, being listed at that price. That gives you a little shorter term view of the marketplace and how it works. And then even I used to say not as important, but I think it may even be more important is where the competition is right now. Because you've got to find that spot where you really, really come in at, you know, and if you can offer 100 more square foot at a better price than any other listing that's out there relative to that in price range and area, you're going to win. Because how many of us have looked at a deal and we see these listings, it's like, well, just as soon as this one sells, people will start looking at ours. Because you know, it's like that one is like underpriced or highly competitive priced or whatever. And you're like, that one's got to sell because nobody's going to buy this one while that one's still on the market. And we sit out there hoping that it goes and then fingers crossed that somebody else doesn't list and come in more competitive, because then you're back in the same spot again. So rather than be that person, talk about that, you know, the pricing, the entry, coming in at the right level, because of that, you know, what we talked about earlier, that opportunity cost. Because right now, if you tested the market at the 1st of September, you're probably going to have to take the price down under the market value to come back. Because now you've got age on your listing, people have looked at it, they're like, you know, there's some reason that it didn't sell. I mean, how's it sell in 3 days, right? I mean, just ask any agent out there. Because, you know, we spend a lot of time telling them that. And now it's not true anymore, is it? I mean, it's days are hard to come by right now. So you have to understand what it is that you need to get to and come into a spot on the market that's really gonna make a huge difference for those people, okay? So, I don't know, that intelligent decision, and it talks about each of the steps, and I don't do all of that, but you just have, this is where you become the knowledgeable professional. You gain all of this knowledge of not only that house, but then you gain knowledge of that neighborhood, get knowledge of that area. You look at sales. Later on, we'll talk about absorption, what's happened in that area, you know, either smaller or larger area on absorption, because that's the only thing you've got to go by that says what's the likelihood of this selling in the next 2 months, 3 months, whatever. You go by absorption rate, and that'll give you some clue on just how important that area is to buyers in the marketplace.
And part of this is that, you know, we won't go through all 4 of those points, but the incomplete information too. We're in a market where we are having for sale by owners. So even though we don't use Zillow for hardly anything, it will map some for sale by owners. Because we go to that listing appointment and I bring all my comparables out. I'm all proud of them, and they say the house next door just sold, you know, 3 weeks ago. I had no information on it. I don't know what it is. So we do need to be a little more creative and exhaustive where we get our information. And then also having wrong information. I've had several homes that the square footage has been wrong. I listed a home in Beaverdale, sold it. All my information was based on the assessor's square footage. The buyer's father was an architect. He came in and he said, this is the square footage off. No way this home's 1,300 square feet. I've sold hundreds and hundreds of homes like that, and I didn't catch that. He did. We were 200 square feet off. And here we are towards closing, reducing $15,000 the seller to get it sold because my information was incomplete. It was wrong.
But don't we have to go by what the assessor says?
On the listing, if you know it's wrong, on custom homes, it's common. The builder will submit a plan to the city. Often they don't change it, but when they're building it, they may not have finished off an attic space or may have added square footage in that. So especially on custom homes, it's important to kind of double check that. But if it is wrong, yes, it has to be listed as that, but you can put in the remarks it's wrong, but you do need to call the assessor to get that.
We see, most of the time we see that on additional square footage,
Right.
not less square footage.
Right.
But if you've been in a lot of houses and stuff and you walk in, you can feel 200 square foot most of the time.
In small houses, yeah.
Well, I'm missing some. There's another room around here that I'm not seeing because there's no way. And you get a feel for that. And the only way you can gain that knowledge and understand that is, you know, go on tour, be out, see houses, preview them, do those things that make you a better agent, so that you can bring that part to the table. All right, there's nothing that's going to replace that. You just got to be active in the marketplace. And, you know, going out and seeing those kinds of things. There's two other things. If they bought the house, you know, at some time down the road, they refinance the house or something like that, just ask them, do you have an appraisal? Because appraisers can't use the square footage that's on the assessor. They have to measure the property. And so you might find an appraisal that shows the property at a different level. If you've got anything appraisal-wise, that kind of stuff, you actually can submit it to the assessor and have it, sorry, there was a photo opportunity in the back. I couldn't.
And the assessor's pretty good at that. I mean, on this one, they came out in days.
Yeah.
And I think it was Joe Tercey, you know, it lists exactly who the appraiser was on the assessors, who measured it.
Yeah.
If it's wrong, you can call him
They don't
directly.
want to be wrong.
Yeah, and they'll fix it right away.
They don't want to be wrong.
They won't say they're sorry.
No.
They will.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then quickly, I think we probably want to get through some of this. Is just the discussions that you have and how they're had with people. And next week, we're actually going to go over listing appointments and those kinds of things to talk about with listing conversion and what was the other part of that second? Conversions and objections. Sorry, my stopped working there for a second. But the way you approach people and how you do this, and like, you have to go in conversationally. You have to go in and sit down and meet with these people on a you know, peer-to-peer basis. You have to be able to engage them in conversation, and in that conversation is peppered the information you need to get from them. It's your first appointment, or it's peppered with the information that you need them to have if it's your actual final listing appointment. That conversation, few people are just going to have you walk in the door, sit down, and they go, okay, what'd you find? I said, well, we need to list it at 123. Okay. That just doesn't happen that much. They want to know why. Where'd that come from? They need to know that they can trust you, that you come in with a stack of papers that's, you know, 3/4 of an inch thick, that is the research that you've done on that property. You know, don't go in with this little pretty little thing, you know, this is all my information put together. I mean, that looks great, but go in and show me, here's this stack. This is, and you can do that, you know, that thumb through. Well, I've looked through all of this. You're telling them you're welcome to. I've looked through all of this, and you thumb through those papers like that, and they're like, ooh.
RPR is great for.
Yeah, oh, wonderful.
You can go on there and like change, like if the view kind of sucks, you can change that, or if they have a, you know, better exterior or whatever, and, you know, then you can walk through and say, you know, you have, you know, a better view than most of them on the market, and so you change the price.
Mm-hmm.
They love that.
Oh yeah.
That packet, it looks like you took like 4 hours.
Absolutely. No, that's a great place. If nothing else than the basic information to work off, and you do your CMA on matrix or whatever, it doesn't matter where you know, run the numbers from.
When that conversation has a lot of benefits, if you just let sellers talk, like Lance said, they'll pepper in that information. They'll tell you where the sticking point is. So even though you have an 80-page packet, you'll know what the sticking point is, where they agree, where they don't, and you can focus in on where that resistance is, which makes the whole appointment a lot quicker and easier too.
Yeah, and there's closing questions that you do that don't end the conversation. They're just like preliminary closing questions that you can get, and it makes them stop for a second and think. And some of them are what we call gut check questions that, as you get better and better at this, you realize that's the case. You might stop sometime in a conversation and say, you know what, just let me know this. In your scenario that you're in right now, is it price or is it time that's going to affect you the most right now? They'll literally stop and go, what is it? Because I can get you more money if you've got a lot of time. That's fine. I mean, let's wait until March. We'll just put it on the market now and put it on for 9 months and we'll market it through and sometime in March, probably get a buyer that's gonna pay that. But if it's time, you know, if you need to be out of the house, you know, you're 30, 45, 60 days, even 90 days, you need to get out of the house, then we gotta ratchet this up a little bit. Not only the marketing and stuff, we need to ratchet up the pricing. We need to really zero in on where we're going.
And to find that out, this may seem obvious, but you have to ask. So when I go on my listing appointments, I always go in, greet, small talk, talk about the dogs, kids, whatever, and then have them take me on a tour. After that, we sit down and I say, if this was to all go just in your imagination, you know, just as you could be as happy as you could be when it's done, what does this whole process look like? And that's when they'll tell you, I need to be out of this in a month, or my wife's 8 months pregnant, whatever it might be, that they have these certain timeline goals that will end up affecting the value. And like I said, it's obvious, but if you don't actually ask them why they need a certain time period, or other people are just completely, well, we'll upgrade if we upgrade, we have this house we kind of like, that's, you know, you can be on the market a little longer. So ask.
Yeah, that is a real valid point. Is a lot of times we think somebody's just going to tell us stuff, and it's like, you know, you really need to ask the question. They need to understand what's going on, and you ask a question, and then and you can develop a series of questions. Some of this material you can pick pieces out of it to develop the questions as you go, and you can use them in your initial conversation on the telephone. You can get some things. One of the things we talked about is that I always like to question when I'm talking with them the very first time on the phone. Hey, we're going to come over, you know, and I want to come over, see the house, that kind of stuff. To get my information as accurate as it can be, what things have you done that I might not find on the in my research? Because it's not going to tell me anywhere that they just changed carpet and painted the whole place inside and got it all freshened up. It's not going to tell me someplace that they put new countertop in their kitchen. It's not going to tell me these things, a new roof on the house, just put a new furnace and water heater in. Those things don't come on, but they are going to affect pricing, if nothing else, saleability. About, you know, the timing on market is going to be affected by some of these things, even though maybe price isn't as much, but certainly the time on the market, because now you're more valuable or certainly more saleable because of those updates that you've done on the property. And having them in your head, and when you're going on the computer and doing your prelim work before you go out to see the house, is great value. Great value.
And don't be afraid to pull that back if, you know, you ask them those questions, but I'll show up to homes and it's not at all what I was expecting. It's either much, much worse or much better. And you still have that conversation, but then you pull all your paperwork back. Don't let them see the wrong pricing, because that, you know, will create a presupposition and never get back through. But and then just say, you know, I'm going to reevaluate things, and let's set up another time to meet after that initial meeting. So.
Yeah, so it's just a process, and to sit with the people. I mean, somehow you want them to recognize that you're there for them. You're there to help them. Let me caution you about one thing though, is that if you don't establish that you're in control right off the get-go, and this can be so subtle, but you have to establish that you're in control. If you walk into the house and you give them control, you're in for a ride. I'm just telling you. And it's not being mean. It's not being like, oh, I'm somebody, that kind of, it's not what it's about. You're there as a professional. If they call the furnace guy, and the furnace guy comes in and goes down and looks at the furnace and goes, I don't know, what do you think? Okay, that's not going to be impressive. Okay, you got to be the professional in the situation. So you got to go down, take control of the conversation. And it can be really subtle. It can be, hey, I'll tell you what, why don't we just go in and sit down at the kitchen table? I just took control. Just that small thing. I just took control. Because they'll be like, well, it's really comfortable here in the living room and the TV's on. No, that's not a good spot. And they'll want to do, because they're comfort right there. They're comfortable. That's not the decision-making room. The decision-making room is the kitchen table. You know, I've even had a deal where, you know, they're like, wow, we still got like dirty dishes on it and stuff. No problem, let me help get those off. That's taking control. You know, there's no problem, let's just clean them up, put them on the counter. Let's sit down and do this. So you have to subtly, somehow get control of the conversation because you're the professional. They called you to their house, just like they called the furnace guy to their house, because they need your professional opinions. Okay, so it's just a thing. So many times people that go in and go, okay, what are you guys thinking about listening to that for? That's not doing them any good. It doesn't help them. I mean, you're there to help them. So engage with them and get things done. Okay, and do it through self-discovery and hit the points that we're talking about. You know, about pricing and where it comes in at and what it really means. You need to know everything when you go there.
Do you think it's wise to know what it is they are thinking as far as pricing before you start
Oh,
talking about your
absolutely.
research?
Yeah, in your initial phone conversation and that kind of stuff, you know, I mean, you can come about it backwards. Hey, you know, do you have an idea of the valuation of the home right now, as far as like where you think it might be? Because you live in the neighborhood, obviously you've been looking around. Sure. You know, because you can always come in, if somebody goes, you know, yeah, we're thinking it's like 250 to 275, and you roll up and think, And so, you know, how brutal are you going to be with them? I mean, you might actually go to the point and say, listen, I came out here, but I got to ask you one question. Do you want me to lie to you or level with you?
And it is their home, they love it, they will be offended. I've offended many people with my pricing. And it's just something you have to, more than anything, be ready for, knowing that they want way overpriced and you're really gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah.
It will offend them.
Yeah, and you have to talk to them about it. And they might try to talk to you, well, we just got done putting a new faucet in the kitchen. Well, that's a nice faucet, you know? And you have to be ready for those things. Because a lot of people love their house, you know? They see value in everything. So, you know, and just as an idea, sellers see value in all those little things that they did. And buyers, when they walk in the door, anything that's wrong, they see double what it costs to fix. So have that awareness, okay? If you see carpet in the living room and it's dirty, and it could literally be cleaned, and buyers walk in the door and they're like, oh, new carpet, that's probably like $5 grand. You know, it's a 20 by 20 room. I'm giving you a break. It's not gonna be that much money. But mindset wise, buyers just, I mean, they see something and the dollar signs just fly out the door, you know? So have that awareness that little things are not so little when you're a buyer walking in the door. They're looking for all those reasons. Now, when we get into what do you look at when you come to pricing? And, you know, Seth and I talked about this at length. Obviously, I think everybody believes that the number one thing that has to do with pricing is the area, okay? Because we all know that same 3-bedroom, 1,400 square foot, 2-car attached ranch with the rec room finish in the basement and then the nice yard is worth a whole lot different values in different areas. You go to Ankeny, you go to Altoona, you go to West Des Moines, you go to Waukee. All of those, it's just different values. You take the exact same thing and put it in different places and the valuation changes. So number one, you have to look at area. You know, and area is kind of an erroneous type thing because, you know, appraisers, they do the pinpoint 1 mile radius. The reality that we know as agents is that you have to look at that and then go, okay, where's that neighborhood? Because if you 1 mile radius out and the river's like a block away and your radius into the other side of the river, that's not the same neighborhood. It's not even close. Or you get you get streets that control. I used to talk about Washington was the street. If over by Union Park, where I used to live, if you were north of Washington, it was different than south of Washington. But my house was less than 1 block from Washington. So you did a 1 mile, you went the wrong way, because south was not even close to the same neighborhood. So you have to have some understanding of that. That's knowledge. But you do area, and to me, that's everything, is finding the area that you need to be in. It's whether it's city, neighborhood, general area, northeast, southeast, southwest, those things, that's going to make the biggest difference in your pricing for what you have.
Yeah, so it's important not to just, we see a house in Urbandale, we'll just grab Urbandale. Well, we can also look then at elementary schools, and like he was saying, size, because obviously Urbandale, not all the elementary schools are as desirable. And certain areas, even within that same city, will sell drastically different.
Yeah, elementary schools, that blew me away. I was in Johnston, and they searched by elementary school. I was used to, like, in my neck of the woods, do you go to East High or Southeast Polk? And that's a big thing, and it is a pricing change.
Well, it splits Pleasant Hill. I mean, that's a great example, because the east side of Pleasant Hill isn't a good comparable for the west side of Pleasant Hill.
No, there's a definite borderline there. But I was totally amazed in Johnson. It's like this elementary school. I'm like, really? And so I had to go into schools and go down to the elementary school boundaries to find the areas that they wanted to be in, because that was that important to them. And I found out that there was a waiting list, because if you didn't actually live in that boundary, you couldn't go unless you were specifically chosen off this waiting list. And there were tons of kids on the waiting list. We had to, my buyers had to go to the principal's office to make sure that their kids could get in, because they weren't closing until, I think it was 3 weeks after school started. And they were like, I don't think so. And they're like, no, we're buying a house. We're going to live here. And they had to have proof that they were going to live in that neighborhood, and that it was going to be in short order, because they weren't going to let them in. I was like, wow, that's huge. So again, understanding. So you go from area, and then Seth, we were talking about it, and your next one from area, what's your next pricing?
That's a good question, I don't remember. So style, I believe, was my second one. So, it's obvious you don't want to do a 2-story to a ranch, but you also need to be careful doing split foyer and split level even together. The desirability changes, and we know the problems with the square footage above grade on split levels and split foyers that can be really deceiving. A split foyer that's 900 square feet is pretty typical. That's not a tiny house.
Yeah.
Because the whole basement is finished even though it's below grade.
Yeah.
Really honing in on a very similar style of home. And even within 2 stories, you want to, those can range a lot. Look at the pictures and throw out the ones that don't even look similar, even though they're both 2 stories.
With 2 stories, I would say a big thing now these days is 3-bedroom versus 4-bedroom.
Sure.
Because even though, my plagued house in Norwalk, it's 100 square feet above grade, but only 3 bedrooms up top, and it's going up.
Yeah. And there's real disappointment with people, because you listed as a 4-bedroom, because there is a basement, bedroom, full windows, everything's just the way it's supposed to be, but it's in the basement, and people with young kids, about the time that, 12, 13 years old, you're glad that they want to move to the basement at that point, get rid of them. But, until then, you're like, you want them close by, you want them on that same level, you want to know where they're at, and what's going on and stuff. So, it makes a huge difference. So we're area, we're style, and then from style, you go to square footage, and it starts to get a little muddy, like you said at this point. Then it gets muddy, because then you got square footage, which certainly is an appraisal factor and needs to be there, and it's general space. But then the way that's split up, is there 4 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, You know, is the basement finished? What amenity package is in there? You know, if you've done any new construction things, you go from one 1,500 square foot ranch to another 1,500 square foot ranch, and they're like night and day because of the amenity package the builders put in. So I mean, you got really basic cabinetry. None of them are self-closed. You know, the flooring is basic, you know, it's not wood or engineered hardwoods. You know, the carpet, even the carpet, you know, you look, it's like, that's pretty inexpensive stuff. And you go to the other one, the exact same size home, yet it's got nice woodwork, you know, cabinets, self-closing doors and drawers. You know, it's got these things about it, and you know, you get more money. So which one are you selling in a resale house? So you got to kind of pull that new construction mindset into a resale house. What amenity package am I selling?
A good example is with my builder, we have the base packages. It includes a lot, it includes the house, the exact same house you can buy. But then in upgrades, you know, we'll have it start at 270. Often that house has 100,000 in upgrades in it. They'll sell for, you know, easily 100,000 more once you option those out. And it's just, you know, changing the roof line. Is this a walkout? Like you said, the cabinet thing, is it painted or even, you know, wood tone? Is the shower tile, you know, a tile shower new construction, like $6,000 adds back. All those things, a covered deck, 8,000, all of those things have a ton of value. If you're just looking at square footage averages, you're going to be way off.
Yeah, you know, and the amenities. The other thing you got to remember, as we're talking about amenities and packages in the homes and that kind of stuff, once you get through all of this and you do our comparisons of this one's got this and this one's got this and this has this, but it doesn't have that, and you go through all of that and you start, you know, literally writing them down. This is what this home has, you know, and then you start making your comparisons, and you look at it, it's like when you go from the covered deck. One's got a really nice deck. It's a nice deck. Goes out to a nice backyard. The other one's got a covered deck and goes out to the backyard. But in a resale, I'm not getting $8,000 for the covered deck.
Yeah,
it's not going to add that. I might get $4,000. You know, so you have to have some understanding of valuation. And one of the things I hear a lot, especially when somebody's newer in the business and having to do with, you know, sellers and that kind of stuff, is square footage. I had a text the other day, like 2 days ago, from an agent. They're like, so what's new construction per square foot now? I mean, that's a crazy question, because there's no way of knowing. I mean, I could go to Seth and I say, hey, new construction, only house, no lot, no amenity package, what's your per square foot on your base? And he could tell me that. But it's not reflective of square footage price for his finished properties. You add $100,000 to your base and you didn't add square footage. Did not add any square footage. So you have to have an understanding. And when you're dealing with an appraiser and you're out there and you look, take this, you know, here's this house. It's a 1,000 square foot house. It's sold for $100,000, but this one is 1,100 square foot. So that one's worth $1,000 more or $100 more per square foot than the other one. So that's not the case, because appraisers, their square footage adjustments run from 35 to 50 per square foot, depending on quality of the home. That's how appraisers do it. You better be aware of that. And you start adding on, you know, an extra $200-300 square or 200-300 square foot at $100 a square foot because, quote, you're justifying it, you're in trouble. That's not going to work. The appraisers are going to be like, no. So going back to Seth talking about starting from the micro, that's when I was like, oh, that makes sense. You start from the micro because the best adjustment is twin to twin. That's the best adjustment. because each adjustment is not worth the same amount. When you go from finished basement, how much is a finished basement worth? What's it cost to finish now? About
$25 to $32 a square foot.
yeah. You know the best you're going to get out of it? 18. You know, walkouts.
And then even with that, I mean, you
more.
have to adjust the, new construction, bars are a big thing. It's 6,000 to 7,000 of that finished basement price. So.
Yeah. So in your thing, it's like, well, this one doesn't have a finished basement, and this one does. I should go $30 a foot for that. It's like, no. Depending on the style of finish, you could be anywhere from 10 to 20.
When you have a property that's been either partially remodeled or completely remodeled,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't find any comps within your neighborhood or area with that square foot and that style, how are you pricing? How are you getting to your price?
With foreclosures, for instance, we do the exact opposite. We're supposed to have comparables within a range of this, but often the foreclosure is the very worst house, and you have no comparables. So you have to just make a condition adjustment. We have a category called condition, and then you rate those in 5 different, as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 type condition, and then you just have to make an adjustment from there to what that remodel might have cost $40,000, but certainly the adjustment isn't $40,000. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's each thing, and it's at each level. It's like a remodel that put a second bath in a home,
Mm-hmm.
a second one, that's worth money. It may be close to what it costs to put it in. But a remodel and they added a third bath, it's not gonna be worth near as much. And if they added a fourth bath, it depends. If the bath was in the basement, that adds value because you've added a full area that has another bath now. But if you add a bath someplace and there's already 2 or 3 baths in the house, how important is that? Unless it's a 6-bedroom or something. So you like I said, it's a highly complicated scenario that really is simple at the end. When when you go to the store and you want a really nice apple, and you keep looking and you pick one and you find one, and then you keep making comparisons to that one. Do I have the best apple? So that's buyers out there.
Right.
Do they expect to pay more for that best apple? They don't. They just want the best apple in the group. Pricing's already been set. Out there in the marketplace, a lot of times pricing has been set. And so they're looking for the best apple in that group, because they can spend $175. So they want the best apple for $175. So, you got to keep that in mind. If the remodel and the things like that has changed the price range of the house, that's changed the buyer. Because buyers are in buyer pools. And so did it change your buyer pool with those remodels? If it didn't change the buyer pool, it probably didn't add a lot of value. If it changed the buyer pool, and the difference will be, is it a super really remodeled house, really nice, everything like that, and everything around it is pretty mundane, no big deal, then that might not have added a lot of value. If it was the worst house in the neighborhood and they redid it, made it really nice, and now it blends into the neighborhood, it certainly added value because it brought it back in. It's the old adage of, every investor out there wants to buy the worst house in the neighborhood, because that's the reality of the money. You might very well make money on your investments if you do it that way.
And some of that, when you're describing to the seller, you say, you added to the appeal of the home, you didn't necessarily increase the value of the home, which is going to help the home sell, of course, but
yeah,
you can't really quantitate it.
That's the timing. Yeah, it might sell quicker because of that remodel. You might have less problems with appraisal, because appraisers, they like condition. It's a big part of their appraisal. They like good conditioned homes that don't look like they need maintenance and stuff. So So those things go along and it just gets in, like, gosh, you was talking about view or yeah. And so view, what's a view worth?
$1 million.
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
It could be if you're on the top of a mountain in Colorado and you're viewing for miles and miles and miles, that could be $1 million view. It really could be. But if the view out your back is, it's like somebody owns and it's ground out there that's all trees. That's a great view and it might be worth a little bit, So you just have to factor all that in. What's the reality? How much value does it add? And then do we have that remodeling thing that we're gonna do? We're gonna give you, a cost versus value remodel sheets. And it helps. It's not absolute. This is the way it is, but it gives you some idea of what you might think as far as percentages of value.
Probably the biggest thing you'll get out of that is realizing those improvements, you never get your money back out. Unless the roof is completely bad and you're just making it work again. You'll never get the value back out of almost any improvement.
So it gives you some kind of understanding of that. And so that's the pricing thing. I don't know what else, anything that you wanted to talk about as far as, it's each of those things that you look at and decide how does that compare with another place. It may be the lot square footage. But then we talked about, like, in an acreage, you might be comparing a 3-acre parcel to a 4-acre parcel, and you think, well, how much is that extra acre worth? One of the things you have to think is that extra acre, is it depth or is it width? Because that could be all the difference in the world. If it's extra width, that's worth more money than extra depth. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of little stuff on here, and we won't go through it all again, of course, but even the year built, things like that, when you're doing those ranges, keep those kind of tight. That makes a big difference.
What range do you?
Well, usually I'll just do 2 ranges. Like, if it's a new house, I wouldn't go beyond, and part of that's by the finish inside. So if you have a new 2012 house, you go back until the trim's all up, and then it starts not being a good comparable. So maybe 2005, somewhere in there. For older homes, I usually stop in the 60s or 70s and go back from there. So in my range, the older the home is, the wider the range is. For me, a 1920s house, I don't have a problem comparing with necessarily a 50s or 60s, but 2014 house, you wouldn't compare probably back beyond 2005 or something.
Yeah, and it is. It's like, when did those changes happen? That you went from. I'll date myself here. I went from dark oak to light oak to maple to they started going. Then it started going back dark again, and it was either the darker maples, and what were they doing that? They did stuff on it that was like rubbed. The maple that was rubbed, it had a different look on the front of it. And so it just keeps changes, and I'm like dying because I'm hoping that pretty soon it rolls back to the light oak, because then I can sell my house. So
It's gonna be a while.
yeah, it could be a while on that. I don't know. Same thing like light fixtures. I mean, it used to be that it was bronze light fixtures, or dark brass, and then it was shiny brass, and then it started turning over to the silver, whatever kind you like, and and now it's gone over to the oil rubbed.
Yeah, the oil bronze.
Yeah. Is there anything replacing that yet? Is anybody finding something past
I don't know that
oil
it's
rub?
as common. I think.
And we're still seeing more brushed nickel.
Brushed
and
nickel
stuff.
seems
Is
to
it?
like stay, yeah.
Yeah. So, because that was going to be the next big thing, was the oil rub bronze was going to be the big deal.
We're
So-
using it in new construction a lot.
Huh?
We're using it a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So and it just keeps changing as you go along. And so, how much is it worth if you don't have it? And that's got to be a factor. All right. So some of those things you've seen. And pricing and where you're at, how much difference there is. You want your comparable to be the least amount of difference to the home that you're comparing it to. You do it that way, appraisers do it that way. So the least amount of difference overall, you know, back and forth with these little different things. What does that amount to? Questions about just that process of that pricing, of understanding how that comes about. One of the things that, you know, again, my macro approach to pricing is that you want to look, like Seth was saying, look at Zillow and see if there's anything out there. Always check the assessor site, because that's where FSBOs go to close. Make sure that you understand the assessor site and that you look at those. And sometimes you can actually look up a home that's on the assessor site, even if you don't get it from when it sold FSBO this time. You might find it, do an address search on the MLS, because you might find it from when it sold 3 years before that. And the reason they sold for sale by owners, because they only had a few years in the house, couldn't afford to do their thing. So you can find that information. So dig to be knowledgeable of what's going on in that house, so you can make good comparisons.
And I don't use those as comparables and try to do the whole neighborhood. The main thing I try to do with that for sale by owner is get within the next few houses, because they will see their neighbor's home sold. If you have no clue of their neighbor's home being sold, then obviously you look kind of bad at the listing appointment.
So we have some things about your strategies. Where is it at here? In your pricing conversation, and we just talked about ways that you show things to people and how you present your material to help them towards self-discovery. And one of those is do you use expired listings? And we really haven't done much of the expired listing things because they haven't been relevant for, you know, a few years. Expired listings haven't been really relevant to the cause. They are starting to become relevant now because we're having a few more of them, for one thing, and you got to show people. And just the idea is that you set in your process of, you know, here's my solds, here's my pendings, here's my actives, you know, just like that. And then you've got 2 or 3 expireds from the area. And you set them down and you go, here's an example of people who made the wrong pricing decision. And they feel that. They feel that because these people decided that they wanted to test the market. These people thought their home was worth more than it should be. Those kinds of things. Now, make sure when you look at an expired and you see it out there, make sure that you check the address on the expired, because it may have sold 3 days later under a new listing or stuff. So, you know, just like when you're farming expireds, make sure you test to see if they actually sold later on. But using an expired is a really powerful tool of explaining to people that if you do make the wrong decision, there's a consequence. It's not just the opportunity cost that we talked about. It may be that all your plans, all your dreams, all the things you thought about, you know, we're going to go to the next place and it's going to be great and everything's going to be wonderful and all that, that sometimes that doesn't work out that way.
It also plays into social stigmas. I mean, it's embarrassing to have your home in a neighborhood go up, everything else proceed to sell in a few days. And then that's 3 months later, that sign comes down, never sold. You know, that it's embarrassing for that seller when they're at their neighbor barbecue.
You're selling your house.
Yeah, no, we couldn't. No one wants it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's just, it's another way of presenting the idea behind pricing of the possibilities and what goes on in the process in the strategic pricing. That's another way of just putting one more thing out there that, you know, everybody is not successful when they put their home on the market. It's not always that way. The last thing I think that, or maybe not the last thing, but one thing that we need to talk about is in the pricing structure, and as you're going along, and it surprised me, but I've seen it with a few conversations I've had with agents, is that they've got somebody's house sold, and then it's a big surprise that those people can't buy another one. They didn't take the time at the beginning. You need to know if somebody's selling their house because they want to buy another one, before we do anything else, shouldn't you get those people into a lender to see if in fact they sell their home and they have an estimate of this much money coming from it, are they capable of buying another house down the road? I mean, and this has happened, trust me. People have sold their house and found out that they have to move to an apartment. I mean, just think about that conversation, you know, because their professional agent that they hired didn't take the time to have them understand the process. That you certainly don't want to go sign an offer that somebody makes on your home and not know for a fact that you can go buy a place. Now, I did this early on, and I'm here to tell you that early on in my career, I did this to a very good friend of mine. And I literally made him, his wife, and his 2 kids homeless. Literally, that happened. It was the worst thing ever. It was the hardest thing. It was terrible because they found out that they couldn't qualify for a loan. He had a business, and inside that business was a second place he opened up, and then it didn't function well, so he shut it down. But there were taxes owed, and there was a lien against him because for those taxes. He couldn't qualify for a loan. But I sold their house. It was a done deal. And they thought in their mind, well, I mean, if we can't, you know, I mean, we couldn't qualify for that, so we can't sell ours. It was like, oh, yeah, too late. That's already done. I already made you homeless. That will set you straight in the world, I'll tell you. I mean, that one hurt because these were friends. And they were kids that played Little League with my kids. And I saw them all the time. And I made them homeless. They had to sell their house and they had to move out. Now, happy ending in that the house that they wanted to buy was in a scenario where they had already moved. I was able to get them in on a pre-rent. And then I spent the next 4 months shopping them until I found a lender that figured out a way to do it. And I learned a lot about financing, you know, talking to people about that. And so it ended up okay. But I mean, I went to his place of business to tell him that. And he said, I want to take you out parking lot and just beat the shit out of you. And I'm like, I don't blame you. And if you think that would make you feel better, let's go. Because what are you going to do at that point? It literally, that's the effect that we have in people's lives. Don't forget that. Sometimes we spend a lot of the time thinking, what effect are we having on our life? You know, are we going to be able to make more money? Can I go buy this? Can I go there? Can I do this? Can I do that? Me. And as professionals, we have to understand, we literally can have a huge effect on people. You know, elevate them to the top. Do exactly what your agency agreement says, which is that we will hold your interests above all others, including my company and myself. Elevate them to that level and treat them that way and service them that way. And you might not have that kind of an issue like I did, because that was brutal. That was brutal. Him and I still joke about it to this day. He's like, oh yeah, I remember when you ran our family out of our house. You know, now it's funny. It wasn't then.
Well, and that ties in financially to doing the estimate of proceeds too. Once you come to that right price, do that. I've been guilty of not doing it because it's my least favorite thing in the whole process. It's almost a little embarrassing at times to do. Say, we're selling for this, this is what you end up with, and this is what what I get type thing. But it's still important because they're gonna get that CD before closing, and you don't want that call saying, where did all my money go? This doesn't allow me to pay off this credit card, that's the whole reason I'm doing this, or whatever it might be. So even though it sucks, do the estimate of proceeds and let them know ahead of time how much it sucks.
One of the things you can do too, and I know a lot of people struggle with this, especially when you're a little bit newer in the business. A lot of people struggle with the amount of commission that's on an estimate of proceeds. Because you look at it, they're going to walk away with $15,000, and it's costing them $18,000 to sell the place. You know, so if that's the case, at least take it and split it. Put each side commission side by side. Yes, I know they're the exact same number.
No, but I
Okay.
think that really helps. 'Cause
But if
people do
it's-
not realize that
if
at
it's
all.
8,500 and 8,500, you know, it's like, this is what you're paying me for my services. This is what we're giving to the buyer's agent.
Yeah.
It helps to explain that part to them. So split it up, you know, put a slash right down the
Could you
middle.
even break it down even more of like marketing costs and?
Well, you can, yeah. I mean, and there'll be some commission things when we get into a listing objections next week. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about, you know.
It also
things.
reminds them of probably the most forgotten fee there is property taxes, back taxes. Everyone says, oh, I just paid taxes, I don't have, well, no, you still have 9 months the day you paid. So anyway, that's a commonly forgotten one, even when you have someone that's really analytical and figures up their estimate proceeds on their own.
Is everybody here a property tax expert? So, boom. Kathy, I know you are. I'm like, no problem.
RTCs are sure great at it.
They are wonderful at it. And you got a distinct advantage when you just call them and they go, hey. No, listen, here's the deal with taxes, and get there, somehow get there. I don't care if you need a set down one-on-one, call me. I'll be glad to do it. But you have to get to the point where somebody says closing date is December 10th. What's the proration?
12 months, 10 days.
Huh? Is it?
Yes.
Or is it 11 months and 10 days? It's December 10th.
12.
It's 12 and 10 days.
Huh? December 12th?
11.
11 months?
Well, this proves his point.
There you
So
go.
it's 11 months and 10 days because it starts from January 1st. Because the September payment paid the last 6 months of last year. Okay?
See, I. Right,
Yeah.
me too.
But that's
Well,
the
the
thing.
taxes were due on
Yeah,
September 1st.
I know.
Which made them 9 months of taxes due that day, which would still put. We'll see.
11 months. That would be-
Yeah.
It's 11 months and 10 days, trust me. Because it starts January 1st and goes through full 11 month and then 10 days of December. Make yourself aware of this. Fight it, fight it, fight it until you know it. If you can't have somebody give you a date and you tell proration from that point, there's something wrong.
There's some really easy calculators out there too.
There's all kinds of easy kind. You can go online. Les Solgrove just emailed out a calculator. Of course, I tested it like 3 or 4 times. You're like, oh no, let me see.
It wouldn't
You
pull
know.
up for me.
Huh?
It wouldn't pull up for me.
Oh, wouldn't?
Like it did with the email.
You
like
must
when
have a
clicked on it.
specific, like, you have to, be approved. Something like that. But yeah, you know, no taxes. Because if you go on there and you tell somebody that, you know, taxes are $2,300 and they're like, whoa, I just paid my taxes. I just got done paying them. They're up to date. At least know this, the day you pay taxes, you owe 9 months. The day. You're 9 months behind. The day. And it goes from 9 to 15, and you pay again, and it goes back down to 9. At least understand that concept. Okay? Proration is never less than 9 months. Of course, then throw the caveat in, unless you're one of these older people who pay their taxes once a year. When it first comes out, they pay both first and second payment. And they'll throw that out for once in a while. But that's how it goes, 9 to 12, 9 to 12, 9 to 15, 9 to 15. That's how it works. Okay, so understand that concept so you can explain how taxes work. Okay, so what have we passed out? So we passed out the cost value.
We've not, nope. Oh, that one, yeah.
This one we passed out. Okay, so wanted to talk about this. We'll pass these out. This is CMA programs that I've used in the past. Yeah, I've got these. We'll start. And then this is another CMA worksheet that you can use that helps get things together.
These are all on Drive too.
Yeah, these are all available. And so different ways of doing it, thinking about it, looking at it.
It's a packet. This is the same. It's a packet, yeah, so just grab one.
I just want you to share. I know how you do it. So a couple of different, ideas of putting that information together, and you can also do it. Matrix has that. Does anybody use Matrix to do their CMAs? Huh?
Yeah, there's.
What? Oh, you need one more? Okay. So the idea is to gather that information like we talked about. You gather, and then you start zeroing down to, okay, I've got, 3 or 4 that are solds that I want to use as my comparables. And I want to do that because I need to know that the house I sell is going to appraise. I need to know that. So you have to have some understanding of the basics of appraisal. Can anybody tell me what bracketing is? For an appraiser, what's bracketing? No? Okay, here's the deal. When you're looking at solds and stuff, as you're looking through and stuff, you need to find a house that could be used as a comparable that sold for more than your house is going to. Because appraisers need one over to adjust down and one from below to adjust up. That's called bracketing. That's how appraisers come to their conclusions, is bracketing. So, and this came into play a lot when I lived over in Union Park and sold quite a few properties over there. It was always really tough because if you got one of the nice ones, the very first thing I had to do is look back 6 months and go, is there a comparable somebody can use? Because I'm going to sell this house for more than any other house that's out there generally, unless one of the nice ones had sold in the last 6 months, and then I at least have the bracket comparable. So I can get one above, so they can hit above and come down. And even the top one can even be the exact same price, but it has to be that or higher. So that's bracketing. So understanding that for an appraiser will help you a little bit, and like, okay, and that's that's where the for sale by owners come in and that kind of stuff, and that knowledge base is so we should be able to get there. There's no guarantees in life, but we should be able to get there based on what I'm seeing out. Okay, so you need to have that knowledge for your solds. Then the pendings, you do the same thing. You bring them together and put it in. It's like, this shows me that there are active buyers in the marketplace in the last 30, 45 days that have bought a house that's in that same basic price range that mine is. Makes sense, okay? So should have an active buyer pool. So now we have an active buyer pool, and then you go back into the actives again and go, okay, this is out here. If I'm showing a buyer, this is the group. This is the ones they're going to look at. How's my listing going to look in that group? Okay, so then that determines the entry point, that kind of thing. So when you're making the adjustments, keep that in mind, because you're actually going to do 3 CMAs. You're going to do the CMA for the solds, you're going to do the CMA for the pendings, you're going to do the CMA for the entry pool. So there's 3 different levels of adjustment, and that's a lot of detail. It happens, it's not a whole lot to it. So understand that and use this second page of that handout, and you'll see this abridged CMA worksheet, you know. And this is done by Mike Swain, is who does this, and it is for the school, the association school. But it's this where you have all this different market data. This isn't everything, you know, it can be different than this. It could be specific things that you need to add in there. There's some blanks down there, but it takes your subject property and answers all of those questions. And then each comparable, and the comparables are adjusted to the subject, okay? So if the comparable has something that the subject doesn't have, you subtract value to make it comparable to the subject home. If it doesn't have something that the subject home has, you add to make it match the subject. Okay, so that's the concept behind that. So you add and subtract based on the different things that you see, that you find in all of your research, and that starts bringing you in. Like starts molding this, well, this house, if it didn't have that, but it did have this, how much would that have been worth? And if it, you know, had this, didn't have that, that kind of things, you make those adjustments, and you make them off of location, you make them off of proximity, because the closer to the subject the house, the better. And that's where your adjustments come from in the process of determining your price range. There's a lot of mental games that you play. Well, I don't know, is that really that important? And you go back and forth and back and forth. But that's the process of fine tuning the price and getting it. And if you do a really good job and you have your comparables and your adjustments and that kind of stuff, you should be comfortable enough when the appraiser goes to your house, you know they're coming. They always call and let you know that they're stopping by. And so they're going to go do the house. And you go to the house because you know what, it's got a couple of special things, and it's kind of a little bit different than some others. And you go in and go, hey, glad you're here. Just thought I'd stop by and say hi. I don't, you know, usually don't get to see you guys very often. And what I brought with me was my CMA, just in case. And you give it to them. And it shows the houses you used and adjusted from, the amenity package that you saw that need adjustments to make it happen. And you won't have the scenario I had on one where I had, and I was upset about this, I had this really nice house that had a really nice deck, and it was covered. And the comparables that came back in the low appraisal had a comparable that had a door, not a slider, not a French, but a door with a storm door on it that walked out to a concrete extension of the driveway that they lovingly referred to as a patio, with no adjustment, none, zero, but yet came in $7,000 under valuation on my sale. She sold it. Do you remember that one with the covered deck on the back on the south side?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They didn't adjust, remember that deck with the nice cover on it? They did not adjust one dime. And that was a nice place.
And that was okay for my.
Yeah. But I think
Inline.
what did I give it, $5 grand, and we still had to,
Yeah.
we still all had to ante up a little bit to make it work. But if I'd have taken the time to do all my work and met that appraiser down there and said, here, look, I've done some of your work for you. Because they're just like anybody else. They're like, well, she must have come see me. Oh, yeah, that did
They
work.
all won't be that receptive though, I don't think.
Do you hand in a piece of paper? Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, they're fine with that.
A lot of it's presentation. I mean, you never want to,
This is how it should.
because they.
Yeah.
I laid mine on the counter.
Yeah, you can.
In my personal
You
house.
can be subtle, you know.
Here you go.
You can do a thing, go, wow, did you see the fireplace? You know?
I've had my sellers type up
like list of all their updates and what they've done and just leave it on the counter
Yeah,
for
Yeah.
when the appraiser,
Right.
especially if it's like,
Yeah.
we need you really tight.
and you know, when it's tight, you're,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that's especially important if you have an investor that's flipping homes to really show what they've
It
done.
is. So, any other questions? Anything we didn't cover that we should have?
There's one more tool we have here, just some investor pricing.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. We wanted to put this out just so you can see it if it ever comes up in your discussions. We're running a little bit long now, apologize. You know, it's time to get the heck out of here. But this is when you're doing, working with investors. This is some of the terminology that they're gonna use. So when somebody comes up and says cap rate, it'd be nice if you at least had a clue what they were talking about. And so we decided to give you these, just so you look at it and go, oh, cap rate, sure, I can get that for you. And if you get into multi-unit properties, you know, like 4 and above, you're probably gonna deal with cap rates because that's how those people talk, investor. They talk in cap rate language, okay? So. Anything else?
Well, I guess I'll end this the way I end my appointments, or at least with my pricing, is I ask the seller, I say, if you were in the price range and if you were, you know, this was your budget, here's all the actives, would you buy your home again? And that kind of drives home the point that they need to look at it from that buyer's point of view. And hopefully get the price down a little bit if some of those other actives are a little more attractive.
Yes? Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Hopefully you got one little nugget out of the process today.
What did you just say? You would determine the price first and then say, would you buy it again at this price?
All right, so yeah, exactly.
Next week, the
Price in
listing
mind.
objectives
Yeah.
and
Say they want 185 in the house. If you were
Listing
185, would you buy your house?
roll in the month.
You had all these to choose from, and that was your budget.
You bet.
I think it was like for us and I think all that.
But yeah, then after the wedding, it's really good. It's like, depends on-
I'll show you.
Like, how long-
How was it? Was it fun? You were out there. Everything went well. I just got to- But it worked out.
Caution,
What?
stuff in the listing where the seller.